Okay, good morning. Thank you, first of all, to all that have joined the call. It's lovely to have you with us. This Resilient webinar is based around the concept of debunking the myths around test automation and discussing how to supercharge your digital transformation program. So quite a lot to talk about there. And I'm delighted that I'm joined by Dan Martland this morning, and I'll ask Dan to introduce himself in a moment. And at a later point of the webinar, we'll be hearing from Michael Wilby of Midland Heart, one of the largest housing associations in the UK, as to his experiences with automation and how he's managed to drive up the coverage and the level of automation he's able to apply. So Dan, if you could do us the honours, please, and introduce your good self, please.
Thanks, Rich. Hi, everybody. My name's Dan Martland. I am the Technical Testing Director within UK Systems, part of the Resilient business. And I work in a lot of kind of technical projects with clients, get to meet lots of clients, talk about their challenges. Obviously, today's session is talking about applying methods, automation, but also things like lean principles, etc., to your programs of work. And as myself and Rich were kind of preparing to talk today, I was thinking back to kind of lean and agile, which is something that I'm very much interested in. I came to the shocking recollection that it was actually 1991 that I first got involved with lean. When I was a undergraduate at university, there was a scheme where businesses sponsored student projects, and I was sponsored by a company that made aluminium die-cast furniture, and they wanted to improve their processes for finishing off their furniture. And so I did that project for them, and I researched kind of new production methods, nearly 20 years old at the time. The Toyota production system, which then went on to be just in time and lean and lead into agile and DevOps and all the great things we do today. So yeah, that was a bit of like a, oh my gosh, I am old moment.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So thinking about our the title of our webinar, so debunking the myths. Is it actually about myths or actually misconceptions about automation? You've obviously worked with an awful lot of clients on behalf of Resilient from the automation perspective. What kind of things do you come up with when you actually sort of talk to our clients?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are kind of like classic challenges that clients feel that they have or they need to overcome, or reasons why they can't do automation, implement automation. And you know, we cheekily called this session, you know, better, faster, cheaper. Why pick when you can have it all? And really, what we're alluding to there is people think that automation will be expensive, or they think actually it will take a lot of time to implement automation, or that, you know, they won't get good results out of their automation. And quite often that's down to, well, way back in the day. So again, paraphrase, Dan is old. You know, when I started with automation, it was all the commercial tools, like WinRunner. People are really old, or Quick Test Professional, before the new open source stuff. And back in the day, when tools were a bit more clunky, maybe it was expensive and difficult to implement automation. But with the new range of tools, with the new way that projects evolve, with new ways of looking at how we can build quality engineering into ways of working, we can now address all those kind of issues that clients see around speed of delivery. And in fact, you know, research shows that successful automation is one of the strongest indicators that an agile or DevOps implementation will be successful. So it really, really is important and key to modern delivery approaches, which is why it's you know, it's nice to be able to help clients go on that journey, because there are still lots of organizations that are in the early stages of that kind of process.
Okay, yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So it'd be quite interesting to find out from our audience as to where you are from a sort of coverage of automation on your journey. So we'd just like to sort of fire a very quick poll at you, and it's just a case of clicking on where you feel that your organization actually is in the various different sort of uh, echelons. So as you can see, it's come up. So what percentage of your testing is currently automated? So if you could sort of populate one of those, please, that would be much appreciated. And then we can have a look and see what comes through. Okay. Okay, that's really interesting. Still chewing itself up a little bit, but I think we're probably there. So what's your view on that one, Dan?
Oh, sorry, I don't know whether attendees can see these. Can attendees see these? I'm not sure. So looking at the graph, we've got the majority of people in that kind of up to 25% space, and there's 36% of respondees put into that area. The numbers are just changing slightly, gone up slightly in the 50% space now. There's maybe 15% of responders up to 10%, 8% saying up to 75%, and then 8% saying over 75%, which is great. And we've got kind of like that classic long tail, but kind of classic distribution. So the majority of people in that up to 25%, then maybe 50%. That is very common to see, and that's a really good start. I think, and we'll maybe come on and find out later on maybe a little bit more about where people are in that journey, or kind of what the things they've seen have been significant factors in that journey. But there's clearly some areas which are more open to automation. There's some easy wins that people can make, which is great, and that's why we see that kind of 25 to 50%. However, if you really want to achieve the most benefits, then you want to be working up that kind of scale, and as we'll hear in a little while from our friends at Middle and Hart, that certainly is achievable, and it really is a case of it is a kind of like a beneficial triumvirate. If we can do more automation, then actually we'll be testing more quickly and we'll be getting better results, and actually it will be really cheaper in real terms. So it's definitely worth going for that. And I think the thing we want to talk about today is on this session is, okay, how do we do that? How do we get up that kind of that kind of climb the maturity graph of doing it ever more automation, with aiming towards over 75% being successfully automated. But that's very interesting to see, and I think a representative, of a lot of people that we meet.
Okay, that's really good. I would just like to say to people, if they want to throw questions in, please do it via the Q&A facility. We can capture them then, and we can actually come back to you and obviously sort of share your questions and sort of discuss it through. So please feel free. We would love you to actually give us your questions. So I'd now like to share, as Dan was sort of saying, I caught up with Middle and Hart earlier in the week, and Mike Wilby and his senior engineer Benga Adesola, and they are doing quite amazing work with automation there. So if you excuse me, I'm just going to hook in a film now, which I would love to share with you. So hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us about automation and the challenges and some of the success you've had to date. If we could just start, please, by both of you just introducing yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourselves, please.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Michael Wilby. I'm head of business systems and development here at Middle and Hart. Middle and Hart is one of the large housing associations based in the Midlands, about 35,000 properties and good 70,000 customers. And we do a mixture of in-house development and configuration of major systems as well. to support our tenants.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Olubenga Adesola. I'm one of the solution integration and testing engineers for Midland Heart. Primarily, I support our digital projects, provide test function for that project, and oftentimes I get also pulled into our other projects as well and provide test function for those projects as well. I have been with Midland Heart for quite a while. Started as application support expert, and then I became a test engineer. So bringing my application knowledge and experience into testing to make sure that we always test our applications and they are always fit for purpose to meet today's business challenges.
Thank you both. So we're interested in discussing with you some of the automation capability that actually sits within Midland Heart. And I think it's fair to say that you are going towards achieving quite a high percentage of automated driven scripts and effort over your total testing effort. So I guess my first question is how does that actually sort of look like? What sort of percentages do you find you're going to be able to and are achieving? And how have you gone about actually being able to do this, please?
Okay, so perhaps I'll pick this up first from you, Benga. Where we've been focusing our effort and attention is around around our core systems. So particularly our housing management system, which is kind of the centre of the web of everything. And housing management systems are effectively sort of niche ERP solutions and quite detailed. One of our challenges has been to stay very sort of aligned on the upgrade path, and this creates a huge amount of work. These complex systems have a massive business impact if they're not put in correctly, and every upgrade is quite a potential for impact. So we started our journey with Resilient, looking at how we could mature that process. And we produced a whole load of scripts, really separating out our system testing and our SIT from our UAT. And then when we started looking at automation, it was driven by us realizing that for every single upgrade, we were spending in the order of 50 or more man days just to test that system. And actually, as patches and new functionality comes out, very hard to deliver that kind of change and that agility to the business without taking a huge amount of time. And that takes away, as you heard from Benga, who's supposed to be doing quite a lot of testing on our other projects. I'll let Benga pick up a bit on actually what we did, but the result is we looked at the number of scripts that we could potentially automate and realised there was quite a large number. I think we're talking in the order of sort of 75 to 80% of our basic regression pack can be done, and that means that our testing should go down from 50 days to the order of about 10, and that'll allow us to focus on what's changed and what's new. Benga.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael. Just as Michael put it, before we got to where we are today, our testing has always been manual intensive, so spend quite a lot of time. We do go through a lot of changes with our applications, our housing applications, a lot of upgrades every year, and which require a lot of testing every single time. And that takes a lot of time and effort in terms of resources. So we realized if we keep on that path, it wouldn't really be sustainable in terms of efficiency. So we realized, automation is the right thing for us to do next. And we explored and reviewed all our test cases, quite a lot of them really. And then we were able to find those candidates for automation, and that kickstarted the journey really.
That's excellent. Okay. And to actually achieve this, what was this a purely internal effort? Was it more of an external effort, or did you sort of blend the balance using internal, external expertise? And how did that actually work if that was the case?
Do you want to pick this up, Benga?
Yeah, we actually made a few attempts, initially. So because we thought this was something that we could just go out there, pick up a solution or a tool off the shelf, and then try and use them for automation purposes. I would say that didn't really go well. And in hindsight, if we look at what we didn't probably follow the process we could have followed. And this was something that I thought we could do on my own at the time. I just asked, "Can you give me funds to have this tool and try them out?" But it didn't work because from the lesson from the back of that was we needed to do a bit more initial work, like discovery in terms of our environment and platforms, and also be able to review what sort of testing we could automate, review what is the applicable or appropriate tool we could use. And when those questions started coming up, that's when we realized actually this is probably something that we could not handle ourselves. So we realized we probably need more expertise.
Right.
And in-house, we didn't really have that. So we got this steer from Michael, who said, "Okay, you know what? Let's bring in experts. Let's talk to them. Let them give us some guidance." And that was what led to the third-party involvement. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd add to that as well. It's as Benga says, you can experiment with this stuff, but actually you don't know what you don't know. And where I think our real partnership on this has come is that not only was Resilient helping us mature our test processes internally anyway, but it was the fact that Resilient was able to come and talk to us about what we wanted to achieve, how we wanted to do it. Didn't try and sell us a particular technology. It was looking at what was appropriate for what we were trying to do. And I think also understood that whilst we needed a lot of help implementing it in the first place, our vision is that we can maintain and manage the regression packs ourselves going forward. But when there's any heavy lifting to do, so a new product comes in or there's a big update to a system, maybe we're bringing a whole load of new functionality in. At that point, we'll be looking to fall back on that partnership and say, actually, how can you help us? Can you get this one over the line for us? And I think the other bit to say is that where I'm looking for this to go is that whilst with regression testing, you quite often pick your battles. You're looking at how much of a change you're making to the system, and then you'll cut that down accordingly. And that's the one way to manage your sort of scarcity of resources. With this solution, what we're really hoping to do is see the assurance go right up through the roof, because actually we'll just run the entire suite every time we make a change.
Yeah.
No, okay, so that makes sense. So you've got that lovely balance then now in place that you can sort of bring in Resilient when you need them, but at the same time you have a self-sufficiency now in place and understanding that you can progress things yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it'll be very interesting for people listening to this who may be struggling with automation or trying to actually make it effective and efficient. If you were a question to each of you really, sort of list the things that you think you need to get in place beforehand and actually sort of consider what needs to be done to actually make automation successful. What would those lists look like? And I'll throw that over to the floor. It'd be great to hear from both of you.
For me, I think it's you can't run before you can walk. So you need to actually understand where you are in your own testing capability and the maturity of that. A lot of our success has been underpinned by the scripts that we had done for manual testing purposes, and that was properly understanding the separation of system testing, system integration testing, and UAT, and where this would all be applicable, and then determining out of those out of those test cases, which could be automated, which could be partially automated, which couldn't be automated at all, because there'll always be a chunk we found that has to be run manually. Once you've got that sorted, and if you're not sure what you're doing, it's always useful to get some expert advice on that. But once you've got that in place, that then allows you to look at the systems that you want to automate. But there's probably something here as well. It is an investment, and you have to be sure that there's a return on it. So with our core housing system, no question at all, because we're putting updates on it several times a year, and the risk around it is significant. So this will be a huge benefit, and really will. You can write the business case to say this is the amount of resource days we will save, which will then be available for working on other projects. Where it might not be so appropriate is if you're doing one-off implementations, or the upgrade cycle is either very small or it's very long term. So a lot of it for me is about looking at the business case, realizing how you can bring those benefits in, both in terms of resources and managing your risk.
Okay, that sounds good. Benga?
Yeah, if I just may add to what Michael said, it's pretty much cover everything there, to be honest. Yeah, just to add to that, when you considering automation, it has to be where continuous testing is important. So where you know, in an environment where you always have to constantly test, and volume is also very important, because you will have to be able to assess the value that you're going to get from, because automation can be it could be a sort of expensive journey depending on how much of automation you're doing, but there's a cost to it, you see, how much small or large it is. So you have to weigh to see, is it worth automating this test? Is there some element of continuous testing that is really required? And as Michael said, your test cases must be in such a state that they are ready, they are mature enough for automation. So first step is make sure you have them reviewed and make sure you have them all well up to date. Make sure that your test data are also relevant and applicable. It might also require you have a dedicated environment for automation. It could be just a server somewhere, a box somewhere that it needs to have its own place, really, to be honest. Depending on the environment as well, it could be you have certain tools in place that you also have to, you know, connect your pipelines and, you know, link that to your automation and all that. And then the tool you use as well, like I said earlier, has to be relevant to your infrastructure and environment. You have to choose wisely.
Okay, that sounds terrific. Okay. Well, that's great, gentlemen. Thank you. It's very much appreciated for your time and your thoughts on the subject of test automation. As I say, I think this will be of great interest to our audience. And good luck for your programs and projects in the future.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks,
you.
Rich.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, so that was rather illuminating, Dan. They're obviously doing really well, moving in a fantastic direction. And on that percentage graph that we showed earlier on with our poll, they were probably up at the top level, to
Definitely,
be honest.
yeah.
What's your view on that?
I think first of all, it was very open of them to discuss their experiences of implementing automation. I thought it was particularly interesting to hear that, you know, they had attempted to do automation from first principles themselves and found it challenging, but then, you know, they'd kind of refocused and got some support and were able to really accelerate that journey. And they had some really interesting kind of insights there, I think, in terms of the fundamentals and the things that you need to have in place. You know, one of as I was kind of like refreshing my kind of thoughts on lean methods, and there's a Japanese principle that's used in lean, this 5S model of kind of how you set up and define your processes. And the 5 S's are Japanese words, but in kind of bastardized into English, they are sort, set in order, shine, standardize, sustain. And the whole point there is to put your fundamentals in place, understand what those fundamentals, identify the things that are adding value, put those fundamentals in place, make them standard. And only then, once you've got the right things in a polished form, do you then automate them. So when Michael was talking about how that it was underpinned by their manual test scripts, that was really, really, very much on the money there for me. And when I'm talking to clients about implementing automation, automation is about kind of repeating the detailed activity of your test, but you need to know what that detailed activity is. And many organizations have a pragmatic approach to testing where they rely on the knowledge of their people to kind of provide that level of information. They don't necessarily capture that somewhere in their test assets. And again, it seems counterproductive perhaps to have detailed manual test scripts as a prerequisite for automation, but that is very much an enabler there. And there doesn't have to be extensive, documentation in a management tool or whatever, but as long as they are detailed steps. And then as we'll talk, you then turn those things into a kind of a consistent library of actions that your system will use or consume when it's actually carrying out that automation. So yes, very, very interesting to hear about their fundamentals, very interesting to hear about the benefit they're achieving. So some of the things that Michael said there, we talked about reducing his cycle of regression testing from 50 days of effort down to 10. He talked about increasing his levels of coverage in regression testing because he can afford to run the pack every single time. If you think about time is money, as well as time being time, then they really have achieved faster, better, and quicker by using automation, which was the the tagline that we were promising for this session. So a very, very strong kind of case study, if you will, for that as a benefit of automation.
Okay, that's good. I mean, it would be interesting to hear from again our audience. So we've got another little poll for you. We're interested in some of the challenges that you get when you do your automation. So we're going to fire out this poll now, which was just to ask you really what the key challenge is. So what do you find as the biggest challenge with automation? And I think it's a case of deciding which of those. And obviously there are others, but the screen wasn't going to be big enough to do that. So if you could perhaps just click on one that you feel is the one that hits yourself the most. I know from experience which one I've put in. So this is interesting. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Stato, otherwise known as Dan. What do you think, Dan?
So again, this is very much in line with what we see, what we hear, we talk to our clients. So yeah, deciding the right tool might be something that's a little bit of a challenge. Building the framework, actually these days there's lots of well-established frameworks, so that is becoming a bit of a solved issue, although there's still more that can be done in that space. Running the test reliably, and I have noted as well, we've had a question in from Philip, which we will come to, that also kind of addresses that question or that point. And keeping up with change, absolutely, and using test assets in subsequent projects, that's almost like keeping up with change dialed up to 11, almost. And we've seen that with client organizations. So we've seen client organizations, I won't mention any names, who have effectively bought the wrong tool. They've implemented an automation tool that was very niche. So when you're picking that tool, it's not just about what your needs are for today. It's going to be, okay, what are our slightly bigger picture needs? What are we going to need in 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line? understanding that slightly bigger picture. What's the scope of our organization? What kind of skills are common in our organization, especially amongst our more development colleagues, perhaps, or development teams? Picking a tool that is built using a language that is your in-house preferred language will mean that you will have access to resources that can use that tool more effectively, help you build it. This idea of running the test reliably, and maybe we'll talk now about Philip's question as well about, how do we ensure that test data is available to run end-to-end tests, and how can we make sure that the scripts are robust and resilient? I think there's a couple of things that we need to do there, maybe 2 or 3 things that we need to kind of look at implementing. The best answer for that question is to have total control over your test. So ultimately, you want to build your tests in a modular fashion. And this, again, is where this idea of consistency pays out. And that also actually helps with the challenge of keeping up with change, which is another big item on the list that people see as a challenging aspect of automation. So if we manage to, or if we focus on building our implementation with the right components, so we need to understand, what kind of actions does the system use, what kind of actions will our users undertake, and then build those into our framework and build up a library of consistent actions or key valuable things that users will do. Then we can then start to take total control of those items. So let's consider BDD as an approach, behavior-driven development, which I'm sure most people on the call today are familiar with. This is the idea where you have a test that's expressed as, given a set of preconditions, when I carry out an action, then I see a response from the system. Using that given clause, that's where you should really be taking total control. So let's use a classic simple example everyone knows about, buying a book from Amazon. So given that I search for a book, given that I see the book is there, given that the book is in stock, when I click add to basket, then that my basket then shows that the item has been added. And that aspect of controlling the data is key there. So in the gold standard answer would be you either create that data as part of your test startup and you tear it down again as part of your test cleanup, or you stub out the connection to the database and have a kind of like a trigger in the background where you can cause behavior to happen. So you might have a scenario where you might decide that product A will always be out of stock, product B will always be in stock, and so therefore when the user requests that item, the stub in the background says, yes, I have that item in stock, there's the stuff available, and that then allows you just to keep running your test, because whenever you request the item, it will always show there's 10 items in stock, and when you buy the item now, there's only 9 items in stock, because you've taken total control of that data. And that actually, again, really helps with that chaining again of tests together. Many years ago now, did a project for Royal Mail where they were implementing a new SAP system, and we had a classic challenge in this kind of space, had a really big automated regression test pack, and the sequence that the tests had been recorded in or generated in had captured elements of data in the background, assumptions around what items were available or the status of the system. And then when you run that test, if the sequence of events was slightly different, then you got unreliable results. And when you had a team of 5 or 6 people all building the tests in parallel, but then you were running them at the time in a kind of like a single stream, that caused big problems. So the way to ensure control of data and the way to make your test reliable in the data space is to encapsulate those tests, make sure that every test is using its own specific data, and the best way of achieving that in a cost-effective way, as opposed to trying to reset your database all the time, is to have a stand-up activity where you create that data, or you have a stub that will simulate that data, and then you tear down that data at the end. So you haven't made any lasting change to your database, and you can then just run the tests again and again and again, and always get a reliable output. The other side to it as well is to make sure that you have the right levels of validation in your tests. So again, when you're running those tests, are we getting the right information back from the system? Is it giving us the result we expect? And it's more than just a pass-fail result. You might want to look back into the database and check that, or into your back-end processes, and make sure that you've actually got the outcome that you expected. Because otherwise, you'll get a situation where the behavior is drifting off what was expected when the test was written, and then some subsequent process will fail. And if you have built a set of tests that aren't all encapsulated and separate, which is a very, very common scenario, the next step in the chain might pass, but a subsequent step in the chain is likely to fail because it's built on a set of assumptions around the tests that have already run. So that the encapsulation and control of your start and end conditions are the two kind of most powerful things you can do to make sure that your tests are going to be reliable. Now, there's another side to that as well, which actually is if you can get atomic in your tests, again, you can really start to be testing very specific bits of subdata. So, rather than testing a full end-to-end process, maybe through a user interface, if instead you can drill into what's happening in the background, if you can look at, for example, individual web service calls or database calls, and test the behaviors of those individually, then again, you're more likely to have robust tests. So, instead of having a user or simulating a user going through the front end of your system, instead, if you look behind and see what behaviors are being made up of that user activity, then you can test those individual behaviors. And, you chain together a series of behaviors to form a useful or meaningful business scenario, but you still have the individual items targeted with your tests. And that helps also with the idea of keeping up with change with your application, because the idea of building the right combination of components and being able to understand how those components fit together, have those components well documented in a lightweight way, will mean that if feature A changes, then you can just test a bit of the implementation of the automation that relates to feature A. And any process that calls on feature A should naturally be referring back to that library of activities. And that way, you fix it once and it's rolled out everywhere. So, by building your test assets in a structured and modular way and having a good kind of set of information about that, so you know exactly what needs to be maintained as you are changing the system, that then helps again to you to control or to deal with that change. And this is one of these scenarios where putting in the right amount of effort up front to build your implementation is really important. And going back to some of the things that Michael and Bay were talking about, this idea of the unknown unknowns, to use the famous Donald Rumsfeld kind of phrase, understanding those things. You can easily see how you want to build your test assets from a process of, okay, this is what we currently do in manual testing. Let's convert that into an automated test, which mimics what a manual tester does. However, if we're then thinking about the slightly longer term picture and how we're then going to build on that going forwards, we can then think, right, these are the other things we need to build into our implementation that will allow it to be maintainable and robust over time. And that's the key real thing as well to long-term benefits. What we see with clients who've had difficulties in this space is they may have built their tests to support one particular project, and that project did get the value out of that. But when they then move on to the next project that may be using some parts of the same system, making changes to those, they fail to capitalize on the investment they've already made, which is a real shame to see. So by building for maintenance, by having good documentation that people can understand, you're building a longer term asset for your organization, and that's how you get the real value out of your automation.
Okay, that's cool. We've only got a few minutes left. I would like to ask you a question myself. From the point of view of listening to...
Rich and Dan, there's one more question in the Q&A.
Oh, please, Anna Laura, please go for it.
So the question is, how do we convince the business that it's more important to spend a bit more time and release after the automation is completed instead of going live a few days faster and hope that we will find the time to implement the automation afterwards?
That is a very, very, very good question. So fundamentally, what I would try and push for is defining it. Let's assume you're using Agile, something like that. A definition of done that says we have an automated test available for that component or feature. And actually, if you're using BDD well, or when you're using BDD well, you know, the BDD, the gherkins, the given when then, they're really powerful capturing of requirements in a very, very efficient way. That's really powerful in terms of allowing your developers to build the right system in the first place. So, you know, the message I would be going with my customers and my stakeholders is, let's improve the total quality of our solution. Let's capture the requirements in a really great, lightweight, meaningful form. Oh, and by the way, because we've built this framework that is systematic and engineering led, it plugs into those BDD statements. You know, so yes, in the the first few sprint cycles of a new implementation, you may have, well, obviously you will have a degree of work that needs to be done to build the foundation blocks to allow those tests to exist. But once you've got those in place, actually, every time you write a new BDD script, you know, the automated test is available almost immediately. So it becomes a question of, you know, you're not trying to catch up with your automation. Your automation is actually leading your development. And if you think about TDD, one of the other kind of popular ways of thinking about doing development, test-driven development, you know, that is definitely something that is recognized as a valuable way of working. So, you know, by using the engineering methods, we'll be able to test more quickly. They won't need to have a long delay. By using TDD and BDD, we're bringing that automation forward in the delivery lifecycle. So again, it's not a scenario of we need to wait. And when you get into that kind of nice flow situation, you will be you know, delivering high quality testing outputs to your clients, to your stakeholders, as every time a sprint is done. So they'll be able to see the value that they're getting and the confidence that that's building for them. And then, of course, you know, when you go live, you'll have a much better outcome for that customer. So internal customers, and they'll see the benefit and they'll start to say, actually, no, that's really what I want. So, you know, a little bit of demonstration up front, a little bit of investment up front, implementing a really good software engineering approach, which will enable fast flow within the project. And hopefully you won't be having that conversation then with your clients or your stakeholders about, can we wait and do the automation?
Okay, that excuse me, that was a really good question, and thank you for the answer, Dan. So in wrapping up, Dan, as people sort of go away to the rest of their business day, what are the key things that people should think about when actually sort of looking to expand their automation coverage and capability within their own organizations and those of their customers, please?
So it's about identifying those high value opportunities, as our friend Michael explained in the video. It's about looking for how can we test those things in the most efficient way possible. So, you know, following lean principles, let's build the most targeted and lightweight test we can to test those things. That means testing the APIs, it means testing the web services, but it also means building that up into a library. So be thinking a little bit ahead of yourself. You know, we don't have to architect a massive solution here, but let's just have a little bit of an eye on the future. Let's think about how we're going to continue to use these assets in the longer term, and make sure therefore that we are creating them with enough rigor and documentation that they will continue to add value for you know, hopefully years to come. That's definitely our aspiration whenever we're working with clients, that we're building something for them that will deliver returns within the project itself, but will also deliver long-term value. And I think as well, you know, if you have those kind of product owners or key stakeholders And perhaps in that kind of modern agile methods like SAFe or Scrum, and you do have a person who represents the product, you know, selling to them the benefits of this longer term use out of the automation, such that their product will always continue to be high quality, and they can therefore always give their end customers a high quality experience. And to hold the line a little bit, you know, testers, sometimes we get a reputation for being the people who say no. So we do have to be quite strong as individuals, and we are, you know, often the gatekeepers of quality. You know, we do need to hold the line a little bit, but we also need to be, you know, pragmatic with our paymasters as well. But you know, plan for the future, build just enough to deliver, make sure that we're kind of demonstrating that benefit, and you know, work closely with our other colleagues in the development life cycle, and they will also see the benefit and start to support us in doing that automation.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending the webinar, which we will be putting up on our website. And we will be looking to come back into contact with you to just give you an update, summarize some of the ideas and discussions that we had today, plus some other material, because there was a lot that we'd love to have talked about, Dan. We just ran out of time, as you always do with webinars. So thank you all, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.